Well, Peter, welcome to the team. Where are you zooming in from today?
Hi, Brendan. How are you? I'm actually zooming in from the Tatra Mountains in the Carpathians in Slovakia. That's where I'm originally from. Great skiing and bear watching.
Nice. Well, Peter, obviously, Fifth Wall could not be more thrilled to, be working with you in our climate tech fund. And I think what might be helpful is for those that just aren't familiar, obviously, with your background, to just walk through like the arc of your career and really what sparked your interest in sustainability and climate tech.
Absolutely. So just to introduce myself, as I mentioned before, I'm originally from Slovakia. And when I was 19, so 20 years ago, I happened to have a good left foot and I was a pretty good runner. So I got a soccer and academic scholarship, first to a small college in Kentucky. But afterwards, I got to North Carolina, which was always a dream come true given their soccer program. I ended up graduating from the undergrad business school in Carolina. Soccer didn't work out, but I played left bench, but nevertheless, amazing experience with a lot of talented people. I then joined JP Morgan in New York in their energy group in 2005 after doing an internship with them in 2004. After less than 2 years, I decided to make a switch to the private side, and I actually joined a startup fund at that point called Virgin Green Fund, where Sir Richard Branson was the largest investor. So I moved over back to Europe, to London. I spent 4.5 years there. It was a wonderful experience. I was a young 24-year-old joining grizzled investors and veterans, and obviously a very risk-prone guy like Richard Branson during a time of a crisis. So I learned a lot. It was during the days of Cleantech 1.0. We had some great investments in the water sector. Obviously, very difficult period in the solar sector, but have found a way what works, what doesn't. After 4.5 years, I decided to go back to United States. I joined Wharton Business School. During Wharton, I actually worked on my own startup a little bit with some kids from Stanford in Brazil. It was around solar, rooftop solar financing and deployment. But ultimately, Silicon Valley came calling, and I joined Presidio Partners in 2013, where I've been since then for the past 8 years. That's been a 180-degree experience compared to Virgin Green Fund. Absolutely phenomenal run. Presidio Partners is a fund that invests in software, energy, and biotech. I focus most of my energy on energy and on biotech. And in that period, we've done 9 IPO, SPACs, and reverse mergers, returned more than $800 million to investors. I became partner in 2014. We raised another fund. Truly a great run and great experience where I learned that Cleantech 2.0 can work. A couple of years ago, the partners that were with me, the 3 other guys, have decided they don't want to raise another fund. A couple of them were retiring. So I wanted to get a platform to make new investments. So I joined IPM Group as the head of venture capital, very much focusing on the same sector, investing in so-called infrastructure technologies, energy, mobility, digital infrastructure such as logistics, etc., etc. The one big difference is that I also picked up Europe again. So while I was based in San Francisco, I was making investments both in US and Europe. Again, a great run. We made 10 investments, and I was not really looking for a new position. Things were going reasonably well. We had 100 million AUM on the venture side, but then Brendan came calling, and at some point it was a yes or no. So I decided to say yes.
I want to get into, in particular, what attracted you to, the thesis that is core to Fifth Wall's climate tech fund, like the collision between obviously decarbonization and sustainability and the built environment. But before we get there, I think what's so interesting about your career is that, you have experienced and you have lived through very intimately the full cycle of what we today call climate tech, but whose predecessors were clean tech and green tech and the various hype cycles and kind of capital market cyclicality that has characterized that. And I'm just curious, as someone who's spent their career in the space, like what was that like living through it, and how does that inform your experience today as an investor?
What I would say I learned from this experience are a couple of things. One is capital intensity. Raising a small fund does not make sense for climate tech. You are deploying not just software, but also hardware. So that's one very big lesson. You need to have the pocketbook to make a change. So that was one lesson. The second lesson I would say is timeline is a little bit elongated. There's a natural replacement cycles. A lot of solutions already exist in the world, and you just need to find a way to replace. And obviously in the built environment, the replacement cycle normally is pretty long. So you need to, have the patience, and you need to play it carefully. You cannot put yourself into this 1 year, 2 year timeline. So you need to really carefully construct your portfolio investments and technologies. And the third thing, which I think also we'll speak about later, is why fifth wall. You need to have corporate partners, strategic partners that will help you to deploy these technologies. It's a really big aspect. I think some of the other places, some of the other portfolio companies, we did not have these partners. I think having that network to do the demos, do the early deployments, whether it's software or hardware, is absolutely critical to success to make these technologies work. So I think that those are the main lessons that I would say I've come through, but I'm absolutely excited. And I'm also very glad that the financial investor interest is picking up after some of the successes that we've seen.
Yeah, and maybe there's kind of a corollary. My journey, obviously, in kind of landing on the Fifth Wall Climate Tech Fund's thesis was recognizing just obviously the outsized contribution of real estate to climate change, right? That was non-intuitive to me and also shocking, right? When I was like, real estate is 13% of the US economy, 40% of CO2 emissions. It's a staggeringly outsized contribution. And I'm curious, like when you thought about our thesis, how did that fit into it? Just the real estate industry's specific contributions to CO2 emissions and the climate crisis.
So here, Brandon, here's the way I look at it. I feel like we're making very good progress on the transportation side. It feels like the battle is being won. It's going to take some time. You're starting with, motorcycles, e-bikes, going to cars. Obviously, 18-wheelers and big trucks are some ways away, but there's very good progress being made on CO2. I also feel like there's very good progress being made on the energy generation side, although there's more work needed around batteries, around solar and deployment. So, if you see wind and solar are over 60% of deployment in the US, so that's going well. And I'm very proud to say that I've been a part of this movement. Now, the way I look at it is we cannot just change the way we drive. We cannot just change the way we produce electricity. We need to change the way we live, right? And I think that's where real estate comes in. And arguably, it's a pretty tough nut to crack because it's a lot of installed base. But unless we move that needle together with, stopping deforestation, we will not move the needle on carbon emissions. So for me, this is the next big battle, and probably even bigger battle than what's been happening on the transportation and on the energy generation side. I think that's what drove me. That's why I find the fifth wall thesis very interesting.
I think it's like, oh, yes, the world around us, the built environment, the kind of physical spaces we inhabit that we, create the economy in are, of course, responsible for an enormous amount of our CO2 emissions. But the second dynamic that's also at play, which speaks to your point about corporate partners, is that the real estate industry has this characteristic of being fairly granular, meaning there's no real estate monopoly really anywhere. And so as a result, the size of real estate companies is such that their individual contributions, their individual incentives to adopt CO2 emitting mitigating technology is limited, right? It's just, it's not super high, but also their ability to be able to invest in those solutions is also very low because, they're not going to stand up a climate fund on their own. And so you kind of have this collective action problem where the real estate firms individually can do very little, but collectively they can do a lot. And there's never really been a consortium of the industry to kind of come together and solve this problem. To what extent did, Fifth Wall's thesis of building this consortium of the most sustainability forward real estate owners coming together to learn from each other, to collectively contribute to this large substantive pool of capital that was trying to mitigate the whole industry's carbon problem. How did that resonate with you? I'm just curious, like how, someone from the outside looking in that hasn't seen the Fifth Wall thesis, like how did that appear to you?
I think having multiple partners and having them globally is critical. I think, as I spoke, it's the need for capital and need for critical mass. You cannot just do one demo. You need to be able to do multiple demos and scale them much faster than what we're used to. You cannot wait for 10, 15-year renovation cycles. It's not going to work. So I think to that extent, having partnerships that are already as part of Fifth Wall's Climate Fund and just generally Fifth Wall, and adding more will be critical to the success of the fund. So I think it's a very big part of the thesis, and I'm glad that finally somebody has figured out how to make it play much bigger.
It's the power of the consortium, but it's that, in working with so many corporates. I mean, Fifth Wall today has over 70 corporate LPs in 15 different countries from every major subsector of the real estate industry. And I think by doing that, you almost build this muscle memory of like, hey, here's how you work with an organization that is new to a particular space. We obviously built that in prop tech, which is kind of, our core funds, and then applying that to climate tech, where there's a clear imperative, right, for these owners, even stronger than for prop tech, because it's coming from capital markets, it's coming from their tenants, it's coming from, national and local regulators. There's a real strong pull to actually decarbonize, but kind of saying, here's what to do. Here's the playbook to follow. And here's the role that new technology and new solutions play in that. That's something obviously we've developed. And I think we're just really excited to pair that with the investment expertise that obviously you and Greg bring, to offer them solutions that they just wouldn't otherwise find, but also make them kind of part of a solution in a way that they had never historically been.
Yeah, I think the other piece of having these partnerships is it's not just about the ability to deploy the new technologies. It's also about ability to diligence them and find new opportunities. Greg and I and the team around us, I don't pretend that we know every deal that is out there. Obviously, we tried. There's tools and solutions to do it, and we're enough in the flow. But having these partners as our ears and our eyes on the market will help us to find the promising technologies, to diligence them. Would you actually use it? What is this missing? What software component is this needed? How much further does the efficiency of this tool need to improve? And having had some early conversations with LPs, it's been super encouraging, the level of excitement and what they want to do with the fund. So I'm very, very pleased so far.
Yeah, I think it's one of the, it's a fund that not only has a clear business rationale for real estate firms, but it also has, I think, a kind of social imperative that obviously is unique and I would say is additive to what real estate firms are doing today in prop tech. But from your perspective, Peter, as someone who looks so broadly at the aperture of what climate tech represents, what are the spaces that excite you the most, that you're really excited to kind of jump into and look at in collaboration with our strategic partners?
I'm going to start with a space that obviously I've spend a lot of time in, and I'm going to probably continue. So around combination of solar plus battery. So we still need to clean the grid. We still need to clean the way we consume electricity. So that's where a lot of my expertise lies. And I'll spend a lot of time there. The battery technology is evolving rapidly, and adding solar to it, I'm subscribing to thesis that solar is going to be nearly 100% of new deployments combined with batteries for energy generation. So I think that's definitely one space that I think I'm excited. The second space, built environment. So I think as I mentioned, we need to change the way we live. And that doesn't involve just electricity, that involves cooling, heating, insulation, build materials. We have to reduce the energy footprint of the building by any means possible. So that doesn't mean that it just needs to be hardware solutions. There could be software solutions. So I think that's another big area that we need to spend time on. And ultimately, it will go further. It will need to go to the materials we use. Material science is progressing rapidly. I've had quite a bit of experience with materials sciences from even my biotech days, right? Obviously, it's a slightly different chemistry, but I think the materials that are used in buildings and need to be retrofitted, I think that's a big area that has been somewhat invested, but a bit sleepy. But I think with a nice push, we can find novel materials that will truly change the arc of how efficient the buildings are. So there's a lot of other benefits that were probably not as obvious 15 years ago when I was starting. And 15 years ago, it was a very difficult thesis. But now, because of money, because of regulation, because of the technology availability, we are at a very different point in time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of this moment in time, obviously, where obviously we started to see, these trends collide, but where, we couldn't be more thrilled to be launching this fund. And obviously we're so thrilled to be, pairing that thesis and that potential with, people that have lived through cycles and people that have really been a part of this industry and shaping it and shaping its capital markets for, decades, right? In your case. So I guess welcome to the team. I couldn't be more excited to be working with you.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that I want to mention is I mentioned the corporate partnership. I mentioned the thesis. I think the third and very important part of why joining Fifth Wall at this stage, when I was not really looking for any switches, I was looking to kind of cruising along and doing my thing, is the team. When you look at the build out of the team, Greg as my other partner, his global outlook, being South Africa and studying United States, having made investments, working with giant like BMW Ventures. So having Greg on the team, he looks like a great partner in crime. And then obviously Brandon and Andre spend a lot of time with you guys discussing things, and it's been very smooth. I have a lot of activities and a lot of fingers, and I needed to wind the activities down to make sure I can focus on Fifth Wall. So having that team at disposal and working with, that's an exciting proposition for the next 10 to 15 years. So I think, this is not to be underestimated. It's a marriage.
Well, the feeling's mutual. Well, Peter, thank you so much for, just sharing your thoughts, and looking forward to August 30th when we can actually roll up our sleeves together.
Absolutely. Right. Looking forward to spending a lot of times, looking for investments and doing things that we need to do.
Great. Thanks, Peter.